Going to make a start. There you go. That's the lovely sounds of Zoom telling us that we're being recorded. So hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. Another Europe is Possible has organised today's discussion, which is focusing on France and the far right, and also the shock win of the Nouveau Front Populaire in the French elections a couple of weeks ago, and the way that they managed to stop the far right in its tracks. So this evening's discussion is focusing on what happens next, what lessons can the rest of Europe learn, and how can we show solidarity with people in France who are pushing back against these extremist politics, which sadly is being galvanized across the continent of Europe and elsewhere as well. So that's what the focus of our discussion is going to be this evening. We've got two wonderful panelists with lots of in-depth knowledge and insight and information, which they're going to share with us. And I would like to start by thanking Another Europe is Possible for organizing this. I think the fact that it's happening in such a timely manner is really, really important. I think that we urgently need to have more of these types of open discussions where we can come together and really learn more about the context in which people are working in and pushing back against the far right and the policies of hate and division, which I know many of us work on. So as we know, right now, the world's eyes are on Paris because of the Olympic Games, which itself has a very dark and problematic edge to it as well. But that's why the world's eyes are particularly on Paris. But a couple of weeks ago, they were on France in general as a country based on the election and, as I said, the pushing back of the far right. So I'm delighted to say that this evening we are joined by Alice Picard from Attack France. Alice is going to be explaining the general situation of what's happening in France, giving context to the political situation, and also how social movements and organizations are mobilizing at this moment, and what strategies are needed to take this movement forward and push back against Macron. We also have Anaïs Fley from Transform Europe, who will also be providing detailed analysis on the far right. How and why are they gaining support in France? And you'll be looking at this through a transnational perspective. So I will stop there and pass the mic on to Alice, and there will be a Q&A. So please do put your questions in the chat box if you'd like to do so. Otherwise, you can raise your hands when the Q&A starts. And we're hoping to take up about an hour and 20 minutes this evening. But if we need a bit longer, then we will take up more time. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to you, Alice. Thank you.
Thank you, Shaista, and thank you. Thank Another Europe is Possible for having me. I'm going to share my screen. Sorry. This is gonna take a bit more time than I thought.
No problem. You take your time.
Fine. Fine.
Yes, sorry, I should have said that Youssef sadly is unable to make it this evening, but we will see if we can find a way to get some of his input in a written form over to the people who are here this evening as well. Thank you.
Okay, so I think that you can all see it by now. Yeah. Okay. Right. So, I suppose that it's necessary to start by a brief timeline of what has happened since June. So it all started, well, it's not like it started on the 9th of June, but let's say it all started on the 9th of June with the European elections, when the National Rally got a third of the votes, and we can't say that it came as a shock, but Anaïs will talk about it a bit more than me. So it came out on top. And in the very next hour, Macron announced that the dissolution of the National Assembly and that there would be snap elections on June the 30th and July the 7th. So in 3 weeks, only 3 weeks after the European elections. In 24 hours, the new Popular Front was formed. It was a very nice surprise. And then, as was to be expected, on June the 30th, the National Rally still came out on top with 33% of the vote. Oh, there's a mistake. July the 7th is the second round. And it was a great relief because the new Popular Front got 32% of the vote and secured 188 seats in the National Assembly. So it was a great relief, but no outright victory. 188 seats is not an absolute majority. So the new Popular Front cannot pretend to form a government and govern and rule just on its own. So that's where the problems start. Then the Prime Minister Gabriel Attal, sorry, that's another mistake. Gabriel Attal announced his resignation. It was first rejected by Macron and then accepted a week later. But his cabinet remains in place during the Olympic Games. Macron is repeatedly calling for a truce during the Olympic Games, which is kind of a problem because it's supposed to be a caretaker government, so it's not supposed to take any measure that is political. But we could argue that there's nothing that is not political when you're in government. Any decision you make is political. And then the last episodes that we can talk about is the re-election of the Speaker of the National Assembly. So in theory, the Speaker of the National Assembly is someone who is a member of the party that won the election. But since no one really won the election, it was possible for Macron and its party to make a deal with Les Républicains, so the Conservative Party, and Yael Braun-Pivet was re-elected as Speaker of the National Assembly. And it doesn't augur very well for the future. So I'm not really sure I'm in a position today to tell you what's going to happen on the parliamentary level. There are different possible scenarios, and to be honest, but it's only my opinion because we haven't discussed it at length within ATTAC and with other social movement organizations, but there's no scenario that is very favorable to the platform of the new Popular Front. And on July the 19th, there was the election of deputy speakers. Usually, the leadership of the National Assembly is drawn from a mix of parliamentary groups, but this time, no post was secured by the National Rally. But it doesn't mean, as I'm going to say later in this presentation, that the rest, I mean, that all political groups and all political parties are very clear on how they stand towards the National Rally. So yeah, I'm not very optimistic because we have a hung parliament. As you can see, there are 3 similar sized blocks. The new Popular Front that came out on top, Renaissance, so the party of Emmanuel Macron, center-right or right-wing, and the National Rally, that gained almost 50 seats compared to 2022. So even though the New Popular Front repeatedly called on Macron to nominate a New Popular Front prime minister, this has not happened yet. And I am not sure it's going to ever happen. We'll have to wait until the end of the Olympic Games, that is September. So what is the New Popular Front? Just briefly, because I suppose that you know most of it. It's very similar to the NUPES coalition that was formed in 2022, but it was formed much more quickly. It's a coalition between the Socialist Party, the Communist Party, the Greens, and LFI, and also the new anti-capitalist party. It was a nice surprise that it formed so quickly, but as soon as the elections were over, it already showed its divisions because it was unable to come up with the name of a candidate for the post of prime minister. They finally agreed on Lucie Castet. She's a civil servant and a former Socialist Party member, and she's the co-founder of Nos Services Publics. That's an organization defending public services. It's rather good. And she was the one that satisfied the most people on the left so far. So just a few examples of policies that the New Popular Front put in its platform. Maybe I'm not going to read the slide, but I can show it to you later on if you want. But among the most popular measures, you have the raise of the monthly minimum wage to 1,600 euros. Tax on super profits, the reintroduction on a wealth tax, and the abrogation of the pension system reform that raised the legal retirement age from 62 to 64. And the New Popular Front even promised to lower the legal retirement age to 60. Just a few comments on the strategy of the right. Macron was elected in 2022 because many voters wanted to prevent the RN from winning and seizing power. There is a tradition in France of barrage républicain, so that's a Republican dam against the far right. But this time, many prominent figures from the right called to stand in the way of LFI as well. That was seen apparently as a greater peril than the RN by some politicians. La France Insoumise was clearly expelled from the Republican arc. There were accusations of anti-Semitism against La France Insoumise, which for a British audience is a reminder of what happened to Jeremy Corbyn a few years ago. Éric Ciotti, who's the leader of Les Républicains, so the equivalent of the Conservative Party, even announced at some point that his party would form an alliance with the RN. He was voted out by the rest of the party leadership in quite an epic episode that got important media coverage, but there were LR-RN alliances in some constituency. Still, Macron wanted the dam or the barrier, the alliance to form around its Parti Renaissance. However, a few members and ex-members of government said publicly that they would not vote for the New Popular Front, against the RN if the candidate was from LFI, so in some constituency. What was the reaction of social movements, of which Attack is a member? Trade unions, associations, and collectives have campaigned for the New Popular Front, but they campaign as much for the platform as against the far right. So Attack, for example, produced a mobilizing kit. We called to demonstrations, and we put a lot of our activities on hold to take part in the campaign. We participated in the organization of 2 great meetings in the Republic Square, Place de la République in Paris. It was called by independent media outlets against the far right, and it was quite important events during the campaign. We have published an open letter only a week ago calling on Macron to stop mistreating democracy because he keeps denying the results of the vote. And apart from Attack, there was an initiative by Caroline Dehaas. She's a feminist activist. She put up a platform called 5 jours pour gagner, so 5 days to win. And anyone could go on this platform and find out where it was best to campaign, which were the constituencies that could swing to the national rally, etc. So it was a great mobilizing tool. That's the last slide, and maybe it's going to be frustrating because what strategies are left for us since Macron is completely unwilling to let a left-wing government form. He's already making deals with Les Républicains to form a coalition government on the right. He's also having a strategy of division of the left. He said that he was open to govern with some wings of the Socialist Party. There's also a vile stigmatization of La France Insoumise and also part of the Greens, the parts that are closest to ecological social movements. And some politicians on the right and far right have announced that they would push for a vote of no confidence of any cabinet comprising members of La France Insoumise. All of this is very problematic democracy-wise because the National Rally is not in government thanks to the withdrawals of new Popular Front candidates. That there were 130 withdrawals in total to Renaissance and Les Républicains candidates. It was a strategy to avoid three-way races that would lead to RN candidate to win. And the reverse, Renaissance and LR candidates withdrawing was much less true. If new Popular Front candidates had not withdrawn, the RN would have 70 more seats. And if Renaissance and LR candidates had withdrawn, the RN would have 58 less seats. So that's to give you an idea of how much the left participated in the dam against the far right, and how much and the extent of I don't know the word, but how unclear the right was about all this. And Macron called for a snap election to clarify the situation. Well, it did not clarify anything because there are now 3 equally sized blocks, but that's still, there's something that is very clear, is that the policies implemented by Macron have been rejected, and he's in complete denial of this. And I don't know what to say about the strategy of social movement because it's still debated within my organization, and I guess a lot of other organizations. We released a PR calling on Macron to designate Lucie Castet as Prime Minister. Was it the right move? It's still debated. Because is it our role to weigh in favor of a candidate while we'll probably push for more radical measures once a cabinet, even if it's left-wing, is formed? Is it our role to say which compromises are acceptable? It's not for sure. And should we be as election focused as we were in June and July, or independence from political parties also means being in control of our own temporality? But I guess you have the same discussion in the UK, and it's a never-ending discussion within social movements. And I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Alice. Before we come to you, Anaïs, there's a question here, which I think is probably a good opportunity to ask you this now, given that you just finished your presentation. So Tom's asking, how many Renaissance and LR candidates did actually withdraw? Do you have
80, I think.
Yeah, it's a very significant number. Yeah. Okay, so thank you very much for giving us the level of detail that you have there. And I think what this really shows, it from what I'm gathering and gaining from what you said, is that the work is only starting now, really. So yes, the catastrophe at the ballot box was avoided. However, what comes next is not clear at all, and there needs to be a real strengthening of the movement, and there needs to be greater clarity in the movement itself around the direction of travel and what happens next. And as you say, there are parallels here and in many other places as well. And there's lots of people here really giving thanks for your excellent presentation. So again, thanks, Alice. So without further ado, Anaïs, I'm going to hand over to you. Thank you.
Hi, thanks a lot for organizing this discussion. I have to excuse myself for my approximative English, but I will try to make myself comprehensible. And also, I don't have any presentation, so I will try also to be entertaining so that you can stay focused on what I'm saying, even if I don't have a presentation. So thanks again also to Alice. It was a really clear presentation, in my opinion. So I can start from here and it will be much easier for me. Thank you. Also, just I might seem too optimistic sometimes when I'm speaking, but not because I really think the situation is very open for victory for the left. It's just that I want to position myself from a positive perspective. So don't take me too like seriously when I say like we will do this, we will win, we will govern the country. Okay, so but I want to be in that position because I think it's giving courage to everyone. So yeah. So to talk about the rise of the far right in France, I think we always talk from a transnational perspective when talking about the rise of far right, because if there are some particularities within the different countries in Europe, there are mostly very big continuities. And I think when talking about the rise of far right in France, we can say it's similar, at least, to a lot of other countries in Europe and more widely in the world. We are facing, I think, not only one issue when talking about the rise of far right. There is one issue, the vote for example, in France for the National Rally, but also the turnout, the lack of turnout in the elections. How do you say abstention? Abstention. It's not turnout, not going to vote. Like, yeah, this is a real issue, and I think we are facing the two, and we can't talk about one without talking about the other. The first thing I would like to say is that the rise of the far right always, I think this is really a big continuity within the European country and transnationally. It's always taking roots on social defeat. And it's always taking root when the government, from usually the liberals and the reactionary, does everything they possibly can to suppress the hypothesis of popular victories and social progress. So, for example, in France, the movement against the pension reform, when we lost, it abruptly closed the horizon for social progress. And when the people are under the heavy weight of a difficult daily life and the absence of desirable future, the vote for the far right presents itself as a way of negotiating with the bourgeoisie, with the riches, against other proletarians, other working class people, better conditions of life within defeat. As this is not possible to hope for a better future, then we are going to save what we can, but yeah, stepping on the other working class fringes, and especially those who come from an immigration background and with a big use in France of Islamophobia, for example. And also what's interesting to point is that the parts of popular classes that resist to this movement, to these dynamics, are, without any surprise, the most politicized and the most combative in the country, in France. So in France, for example, we can mention the Red Belt around Paris, so the popular suburbs, which are very, very combative, but also other historically very progressive areas in the countryside. So, for example, the southwest and other parts of France. I would like to mention two researchers in France that are doing a great job, to say the least, to describe the vote for the national rally. They are not at all the only ones. I'm picking two men, but there are also a lot of women working on this subject. This is just that the two men that I'm about to speak of are very complementary, and there are a lot under the spotlights right now. So if you want to find some documentation articles, you can easily find, and you can translate and so on. So, so the first one I want to mention is Benoît Coquart. I will write the name in the chat after, so you can search for it. Benoît Coquart is studying from an anthropologist perspective the dynamics in the countryside he comes from. So it's in the east of France. And he shows how the vote for national rally is an act of integration, of social integration, and personal valorization in face of what we could say is despise of the urban world, which for these people is disconnected with the real life, you know. The life of people from here who just share the same experience in the same daily life. This is a vote of respectability. We all, like for the past dozens of years, the vote for National Rally was a lot seen for urban people as very despisable vote, something you can't brag about, you can't be proud of. It's very like, it reminds us of the darkest times in our history, you know? So it was really not a motive of pride. But what Benoît Coquart shows is like surprisingly for people from urban come from the big cities, in the small villages, this is a vote of respectability. In territories that are disindustrialized, yes, where you understood me, and despised, where all you can do is do your own little way in your life, and being solidary with your little group of friends, and bonding solidarity links also with the bourgeoisie, the capitalists, and the small bosses where you live, because they are the opinion leaders and they are the providers of work. So if you want to be integrated, if you want not to be unemployed, you have to, you know, go with the flow, and the flow is going to the far right. And for those people, the vote for Rassemblement National, National Rally is an evidence, like it's really the norm. When you don't find work collectives, unions, popular festivities also that are accessible to everybody, these interpersonal bonds with the capitalists, even if it's very small landlords, it becomes central in the people's life, and it shapes a relationship to the world that is untrustful, and you have to care first for you and your people before caring about the collectivity. So this is one very big statement, I think, which is very interesting to have in mind. The relationship to vote is also basically a relationship with people's daily life, and with the relationship of solidarity they have built with the landlords where they live, and they are, political leaders and providers of work. So this is really important in my opinion. And another researcher I want to point out is Félicien Faury. He's requested a lot these times. He highlighted the centrality of racism and xenophobia in the vote for far right, and how it is not just any data, but a central one. Of course, the most brutal expression of these can be seen in the far right networks, the more radical far right networks. We saw a lot of violence images between the two turns. It was really, like, it was horrible to see how much the perspective of a far right victory opened the doors for the most brutal and raw and violent acts of racism in this country. So also, even if we don't manage to build a government, the victory we had was very, very important, because we don't know what would have happened if we didn't win this election. So this is, I hope I'm not too long. So this is, for me, in my opinion, at least, it's really, and I'm not the only one thinking that, of course, this is the price of, the absence, the absence of direction of the left, if I can say that way. And it shows that there is a huge urgency to take the power without waiting. The hegemony of the far right is not a fatality, even if it is really strong right now internationally. Within the popular classes, if people have been convinced that you have to oppress others on racist basis, take away their rights from them and their liberties to hope for a better future for yourself, it's also possible to convince them of the contrary and to make a switch in the balance of power. I'm deeply convinced this is not a fatality, and you can convince people, not all of them, of course, but you can make a change and win a majority. I think to reach this objective, there is in every country, not only in France, a very important solidarization strategy to build between the popular neighborhoods, the popular neighborhoods from the city suburbs, especially, and the ones from the countrysides. And I think it's really, really, really important. And this is also what showed the results, because we lost a lot of representatives in the countryside, where the far right is, of course, gaining the majority of its votes. And if we want to achieve this, there is, I think, I don't really know how to do it, but I think this is central too. We have to break the subordination of the people from the countryside to their local landlords and political opinion leaders, which are voting for the far right. Also, concerning the people that are not voting, because I think this is also important, the issue is not to politicize these people. Everyone is very, very aware of what's going on and of the absurdity of our lives and of capitalism and of the world. And everyone is expressing the violence of their daily life with their own words. But voting is not an act as equal to any other act. It's a very important one, because everyone is conscious that it can change reality and history, even if it's not changing everything. You can make a change starting from that and from all the popular mobilization around it. But it's also a costly act, even more when the only horizon seems to be giving power to antisocial forces. Then I think it's totally understandable that the popular classes don't go to vote if they are not convinced that their vote will have consequences, and concrete ones, in their lives. So if the left want to break this very low turnout situation, we have to propose a very credible strategy to take power and give it into people's hands by leaning on the most progressive and combative elements of popular classes. And I think this is what the New Popular Front tried to do and managed to do in a certain way. And I think this is what we can step upon for the future. And there is just one element I want to address also. It's about racism, because I think it's very, very important, and I will stop just after that. We saw that there are 10 millions of people who voted for the far right, who voted for the National Rally. And so a big reaction from a lot of people were, okay, so basically we're living in a racist country, and there's nothing we can do about that. Like, France is screwed, like, end of the game. The question we have to ask ourselves, I think, is it possible to, as I was mentioning earlier about convincing people, can we really, in the urgency we are now, invert the tendency in these conditions? I think it's really important to say and to repeat that the struggle for hegemony is not fixed, and I think people, when voting for the far right, know that this vote is a racist one, and I think Félicien Faury shows it very, very well. People are well aware that this is a racist vote, and they are using this vote knowing that. Again, this is again the rise of far right always takes roots in social defeat. So basically, the fact that you're using this racist vote is that you are deeply convinced that this is your best option to defeat your government, your antisocial government, and hopefully to negotiate better life conditions with the bourgeoisie. So I think what's really important now is, and we have to prove it in France with the New Popular Front, you have to convince these millions of people that only a collective progressist project of that is proposing a global change as the one proposed by New Popular Front gives a credible alternative to capitalism, to crisis, to suffering, to all the fears that all of this brings. And this is not, I think, a communication issue. This is not about copying what the far right is, how the far right is speaking. This is not about, in my opinion, building a progressive populism or this kind of stuff. No, people are well aware of what is behind communication, and if they are voting for far right, it's not because they are good in communication, it's because this is the best option to change their life for them, and we have to convince them the opposite. And so we have to keep moving on, even if it's difficult, even if we don't see how wide is the window for us with the New Popular Front to build a government. Anyway, if we stop now, I think it equals to move back. And so if we, as the far right is stepping on the left defeat and moving back, we really, really have to keep moving on. And even if we are facing difficulties, and even if we are not managing to build what we want to build, we always have to be trustworthy, yeah, trustworthy with what we promised we will do, and keep proving that the only alternative is us, even if people don't choose it right away, to let them the possibility to choose us afterwards. So yeah, I'm sorry, I've been really, really long, but I'm stopping now. And if you want, I have some data on the vote and some analysis of the vote, but I wanted not to
I
say
think
too
it's
much.
great to hear that analysis, and you haven't taken up too much time. Everything you've said has been really important and very interesting. So do you want to share anything else before we go to the Q&A?
Okay, so I will just give really raw information because these are information that are not published yet. So also I don't share anything with you because this is I prefer just it to be talked
Verbal.
spoke. Yeah, you know, yes, thank you. And so I'm just sharing some information. The first one is that, which could interest you, is that the New Popular Front and the National Rally were their electorates were the ones who decided themselves on their vote the earliest. So it was weeks before the vote. And so the electoral campaign did not have a very huge, like, has a big impact on these electorates as on others. So this is one information. Another one is on the motives of votes. You can find the traditional ideological differences between electorates. So, for example, the National Rally, it's on immigration, security, and so on. La France Insoumise, for example, is on inequalities, environment, health, and but what you can find very up in every electorate is the question of buying power. Okay, this is also in English. Okay, I'm making my little cooking, hoping it means something. So, but behind the word buying power, you can put a lot of things, and this is also what the different political formations are doing. So, but we can invest this subject, and the New Popular Front have been investing it a lot also. So we should keep going with it. Also on the motivation for votes, when asked if they voted to manifest their opposition against the Macron and the government, 69% of the National Rally said that their vote was mainly for that. And for the New Popular Front, it's only 47%. So it's a lot more a protestation vote for the National Rally than for the New Popular Front, which is, of course, also to protest against against the government of Macron, but also for a project of society. For socio-demographic data, the New Popular Front is scoring very, very highly in youth, with very noticeable decreasing tendency from the youth to the elderly. The National Rally has a much more homogeneous repartition of generations, and also a few dozens of years before, a few decades before, the elderly didn't vote as much for the National Rally as today, because, you know, this historical duty of memory. But now it managed to break this barrier, so it's also noticeable. The National Rally is very strong in the employees and even more in the working class. It's weaker in upper, like in managers, within the managers. But this electorate is more and more important too, even if we would guess that it would be the more against the National Rally. No, it's also gaining more and more people within the managers. The New Popular Front electorate is more trans-class, but with less and less positive scores within the working class. When I say working class, it is like working class is very wide, but I'm only speaking about ouvriers, people in manufactories and in the industries and so on. Also, there is a very big data very important, which are the degrees and the degree level. This is a very this is one of the most predictable datas in the vote for National Rally. The New Popular Front has a positive linear correlation with the elevation of the degree level. So the New Popular Front has twice more twice more votes within people with a bachelor degree than within people without any degree. And the National Rally makes his most of his votes within people without any degree or with a very short formation, a very practical degree formation, a formation degree. Yep. And in terms of income, both New Popular Front and National Rally are in first position within the poorest voters, but also the National Rally scores also very, very well within the richest, which the New Popular Front does not, really not. And also on the way that people are describing themselves. The National Rally is dominating very widely within people declaring themselves as defavorized. And I'm sorry, I hope it's English too. And equals the New Popular Front with within the popular classes that who call themselves popular classes. So there is also a psychological determinant on these votes. Yeah, so I think this was the most important data I wanted to share with you. But if you have other questions, please feel free.
Thanks, Anaïs, for making additional time to share that data. I think that was really interesting. And the connection between the poorest in society and the richest is basically being played out in lots of different parts of the world, including here in Europe and here in the UK as well. I think that's really important to focus on that as well. Both your presentations have been very, very insightful, and there's plenty of statements and comments in the chat box, but also a few questions which I'll be coming to in a moment. I think the fact that you have very clearly named Islamophobia, racism and xenophobia, in fact both of you have, is really important. And also talking about pension reform and what you said about taking the power without waiting, I think is really important. And in order to do that, we obviously need to have a solid movement, and no movement is going to be solid it has to be built to be solid and long lasting. And in the meantime, we have to carry on and, like you said, not wait and take power. And building solidarity, I think, is really important as well. There are a couple of questions here which kind of feed into these points as well, which I'm going to read because it'd be good to get both of your responses. There was one here which says, I would be interested to know how the NFP ended up specifically mentioning tackling Islamophobia in its manifesto and what policies they would enact, especially as it's difficult to get progressive parties to take the issue seriously, e.g. the UK Labour Party has been bad on it. And then there's a question underneath which is kind of similar. LFI have included Islamophobia in their discourse for quite a while now. The Greens have a rather good history of anti-discrimination policies, but there's nothing very clear in the platform beyond general principles, nothing on the responsibility of the state, etc. Speaking to the issue of institutional racism. So do you have any thoughts, either both of you, on that?
Maybe as I just had a very long monologue, you want to react on this, Alice?
Yeah, no, that's the reply I wrote in the chat anyway. So I don't know, maybe you know, but I mean, maybe you are more informed about that. I don't know how it got included in the platform. My hypothesis is that it's the work of LFI, which has been clearer on Islamophobia than any other party in recent years. It's been quite popular among Muslims in France. And it's very interesting because it's been shown that 80% of Muslims in France vote for the left, which means that it doesn't matter their gender or their or to which class they belong, they tend to vote for LFI because yeah, for a few years now, I know that they participated in a march a few years ago against Islamophobia. Well, all the parties, even the Greens, were not so clear about how relevant it was to participate in such a march. So yeah, I would say it comes from LFI, but as I said, I just had a look at the platform. It's not very clear. They say that they're going to put in place institutions aimed at fighting against discrimination, but it's within a section on all forms of racism. But I think it's still an improvement that you get the word Islamophobia itself in such a platform. But to me, it's not very specific. No one on the left would, I think, win an election saying that they want to repeal the law banning headscarves in schools, for example. I think we are far from that, which means that the left is still not very clear on institutional racism. That's the kind of discussion we still need to have within the left.
Yeah, if I could just add something, because I totally agree with what Alice just said. I think it's also like there is a part of self-consciousness within the Muslim community. Also, not all of it, because there are also obviously minority part of it that there is also in the far right, but who don't vote in the Muslim community. But most people are just really aware with their daily life of racism, of inequalities, of discriminations, of sexism, and so on. So it leads naturally to, not naturally, but you know, with just a political consciousness to voting for the left. And also I think there is a deep link with the history of the Algerian War in France, which shaped a lot the identity of people from immigratory background from Algeria in France, who are a big part of Muslim community, and it also reflects on the other parts of Muslim people in France, and also the fight for Palestine, which has been a historical struggle of the left, and of course, yes, LFI is holding on a lot on this subject. Also, the communists, also a lot of other people, but with the national leaders can be more shy on this question right now, but I think it also was heavy in what led to Muslim people voting to New Popular Front. And also there is a strategy of La France Insoumise in the popular suburbs and in particular in Parisian popular suburbs and popular neighborhoods. Also neglecting a bit the countryside. This is also one of the debates. But there has been a very big strategy to speak to these suburbs, and these are the suburbs where people coming from North Africa and Middle East have been placed to in France when they are from a working class background. So all of this, I think, led people is making a link between precarity, experience of discrimination, inequality, and so on, and Muslim people.
Yeah, thanks for that. I was actually in Paris a few days before the election, and it was really very clear how terrified many people are and continue to be. I don't use the past tense, I use the present tense for that. And as a visible Muslim woman from the UK, whenever I set foot in France, the Islamophobia and France's colonial history is really very in your face. It's something that I feel in this country, but in a different way. And I think the rhetoric of the far right in France is very much aligned with the rhetoric of the far right here in the UK, in Germany, and many other parts of the world as well. And when we talk about Muslims, I think one of the challenges for Europe is how we talk about Muslims. So frequently European Muslims are talked about as a separate entity to the rest of Europe. France has got the largest Muslim population in the whole of Europe, and it's very much seems to be at war with lots of people, lots of parts of its population, but specifically Muslims. And the fact that there has not been anything progressive that has taken place there over many decades is very troubling. And so I think all of these things definitely are going to shape the success of the movement. And obviously the movement often is not as diverse as it should be, as pluralistic as it should be as well. And on that point, there's a question here about how diverse is the new assembly. So do you have any information about that?
The new assembly, you mean the new National Assembly?
Yes, I think that's a question. Yeah.
I think this is what Alice mentioned, but maybe you did not arrive yet. I will just repeat it. This is a third assembly, roughly. The biggest third is from the New Popular Front, then the National Rally, and then the smaller third is from the president's party, so Macron's party. And there is a question on the alliances and coalitions that could be possible between Macron and between his representatives and the traditional right representatives to wait more and not hopefully outnumber the New Popular Front. But yeah, this is also why we are still in a big uncertainty, and we really don't know what will happen next. But I think also the very good strategy of the New Popular Front right now is to present Lucie Castet. Oh, I have Castet. I have yeah, Lucie Castet. It's Lucie. Yeah, I had a hole in my memory. Lucie Castet as a prime minister already working on the field, going going to see like industries and going in cities and presenting herself like the prime minister she aims to become. So it builds a scenario, you know, but we don't know if it will become a reality.
Mm. Okay, there's a question here about the NFP and Ukraine, question about clarification on a policy on Ukraine. Some of the parties that are part of the coalition, the Socialists, the Greens, for example, the New Anti-Capitalist Party, have supported Ukraine from the beginning. It was a bit different, and it seems that this has changed. So yeah, can you provide some clarity, Alice, and as well on that?
I know that Attack is working more on the question of Ukraine, but it is always a tricky subject.
I mean, if the question is the trend going to continue, I don't know. And I'm not a specialist myself. There are other people within Attack that are much more expert on the issue than me, but it's not only the Ukrainian issue, as I understand, because not being a specialist myself, I won't criticize, and not a specialist on LFE's policies as well. I think that there's quite an agreement within the left that LFE is quite weak on foreign policies.
It's not a good time to be weak on foreign policy.
Yeah.
No, it's not.
Weak on foreign policy, but certainly not now, is it? Yeah.
The only thing that but that's actually why the NUPES failed and got divided in the end, is that LFE was the only party that was clear on the Palestinian issue. That's the only, yeah, that's the only matter they are well, I mean, I don't know if that's the truth, but that
was a pretext for me.
Yeah,
but...
yeah, that's yeah. They got rehabilitated
yes
through that matter, but that's really the only matter.
Did you want to come in?
Yeah, no, on Ukraine the same. I'm not really an expert. Myself, I am wondering about all this militarization, non-militarization issues. So I just don't want to say anything dumb or or not relevant. But yeah, and I really, it's one of all I can say is that if you want to know what the New Popular Front stands for, you really have to read the program, because when the alliance was built, it was really in urgency, and it was also on the claim of the social movement, the organized one, more, for example, Attack, but also a lot more of collectives, associations, organizations. And so and the main priority was to defeat the national rally. So there are a lot of heavy debates on which nothing is set and people are really not agreeing and maybe will never, that were just put aside, and we decided just it's not the priority. We will fight against each other when we will be in government and when we will have power. But now the priority is us, is not to have to fight against the far right when the far right is in power. So this was a lot. Like, for example, also on feminism, there were a lot of criticism on how certain parties dealt with certain issues, but you'd rather fight against the left, within the left, for making progresses than against the far right when it's in power. So on the Ukraine question, but also on Palestine, because nobody is agreeing on that either. And on other issues, it was like, it's still a debate, and the New Popular Front really don't have a clear position on that, because just it was not the priority.
Okay, so I think we're going to wrap up here, and just to thank you both again for giving us your time and your insights, which have been greatly appreciated. There's been lots of positive messages in the chat. I think what we're taking away from this evening's discussion is that there are a lot of things that are still unknown, and more clarity is hopefully coming. At the same time, the far right have been stopped from taking power. However, now the rest is up to shape and to win, and it's going to be complicated, and it's going to be a long journey, and there needs to be a lot of solidarity, and there has to be the ability of the left to really come together and to understand the bigger picture, which is it's got to govern and it's got to do it properly. And I see you smiling there, Alice, as well. So yeah, there's a lot at stake here, but I think what your contributions have given us is an opportunity to really understand in more detail what's going on, what is at stake, and also what our role is as Europeans who may not all necessarily be in France, to build that movement as a transnational movement, because the fight in France is a similar fight to what other parts of Europe and the world indeed are facing as well. So it's a communal fight, and we have to be aware of that and make sure that we all play our role. So thank you again for your time. I want to thank everybody who has joined us this evening and been part of this discussion as well. And this is being recorded, and we'll make sure that it's shared. And thank you very much.
Thanks for facilitating.
Thank you.
Thank you.